Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I'm Vedant Agarwal. Our big focus this week, global recession and how could it impact India? And also the absolutely shocking case of Janvi Kandula and how the cop who ran over her has now been let off scot-free by a US court. We'll get you all the voices that matter, but first up, the headlines. The US cop who ran over an Indian student escapes charges. Janvi Kandula's killer let off scot-free. The prosecutor cites lack of evidence. The American dream, is it turning a nightmare for Indian students? From UK, Europe to Japan, recession risks loom large. Japan loses its third largest economy crown. This has recession fears in the UK as well, though now an upward trend is underway. Europe's largest economy under threat, Germany's central bank warns of recession. And after high voltage post-poll drama, Shehbaz 2.0 in Pakistan, the Sharif Jr. to be the Prime Minister with Zardari as the President. With Sharif in power, is there an Indo-Pakistan thaw in sight? The Greek PM's historic visit to India. The Greek Prime Minister lauds India's democracy, says Greece is the best gateway to Europe for India. India-Greece elevate their ties to a strategic level with the aim to double the bilateral trade by 2030. 2 years of the Russia-Ukraine war. The US set to impose new sanctions on Russia on the second war anniversary. This as several Indians reportedly lured into war zone with jobs, now forced to fight the war. The Indian government says we are aware. Israel's Netanyahu shares details of the plan for post-war Gaza, insists on Israeli role in running Gaza even after the war. This as Israel airstrikes continue to target Rafah, several are killed. No ceasefire likely anytime soon as the US vetoes a ceasefire resolution for the third straight time. Our big focus on the show this week, recession risks looming large across the globe. Big economies and global powers are in troubled waters, experiencing a severe slowdown. Starting with the UK. Well, it has been experiencing an acute cost of living crisis for almost 2 years now. There have been various high-profile resignations in the Sunak government, which have raised serious questions on the Conservatives' competence in handling the unprecedented economic slowdown right ahead of elections. The UK has witnessed 2 quarters of negative economic growth, and the reason? Well, Brexit, COVID, and the lack of investment in key sectors and the government's poor handling, as many point out, leading to back-to-back negative quarters. But speaking of Europe, the biggest concern now is over Germany, one of Eurozone's biggest economies and its engine, so to speak, that now finds itself in trouble. The central bank has said that Germany is sliding into recession, and this period of an ongoing economic slowdown could last longer than expected. The main reasons: a failing and falling foreign demand and nationwide strikes, and most importantly, a fall in construction and house building activity. In fact, as far as the European Union is concerned, while as per reports, Europe may have narrowly escaped recession, a meaningful recovery seems unlikely for the 20-nation currency union. The reason? A surge in inflation amid global wars. But the biggest shocker, as far as this forecast is concerned, has been Japan, which has lost its crown as the third largest economy, and experts say it was weak domestic consumption, investment, and sudden production halts that have unexpectedly triggered recession in Japan. But what does Japan's recession actually mean for India? Well, remember, India and Japan's bilateral trade totals $21 billion. In fact, Japan loses its third largest economy spot, paving the way for perhaps India's brighter spot in the global economy. Japan and Germany are showing similar trends of recession, and the S&P has said that India perhaps could overtake Japan as the third largest economy by 2030. But looking at UK's recession and what it could mean potentially for India. Well, this economic downturn in the UK comes amid the FTA talks between India and Britain. In fact, India and UK have been very crucial trade partners. Their trade equals $3 billion. In fact, there's been an 8% increase in the trade between India and the UK. Remember, UK is among India's largest trade partners. But looking now at the Indo-Pacific, well, amid a global economic slowdown, India remains a brighter spot. As recession risks loom, India, as I said, is still the bright spot as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, because the world's second largest economy, China, continues to face serious headwinds in 2024, with the property sector and the real estate almost collapsing and unemployment at a record high. Meanwhile, our immediate neighbor is in a mess too. In fact, Pakistan is planning to seek a fresh $6 billion loan from the IMF to repay its debts. This after Pakistan managed to avert a default last summer after an IMF bailout. And well, the contentious neighbor in India's backyard, Maldives, is also witnessing a slow tourism-led recovery. But amid this economic chaos and instability in the Indo-Pacific, India seems to be right on track. Though food prices are still a concern, retail inflation has cooled down to a 3-month low. And in its latest projections, the IMF has raised India's growth forecast to 6.5% for the year 2024. So India right on track as the rest of the world finds itself in an economic chaos. And now the first ever full-fledged trade agreement with the West. The free trade agreement could prove to be a game changer for India and the UK. Hectic negotiations have been going on for almost 2 years now, and both India and the UK are keen to ink the agreement before the polls later this year. Despite multiple obstacles, the FTA dialogue is now in the final stage. India and the UK are likely to seal the free trade agreement before the polls in both countries. In fact, an Indian delegation is in London to finalize the details of the free trade agreement before the Model Code of Conduct. The PMO, remember, has also reviewed the India-UK FTA talks, which have been on for the past 2 years. The Indian government says that perhaps the FTA could be signed before the summer polls in India. India is, of course, also moving fast because of snubbing a deal with China, the regional deal that was snubbed by India earlier. But what really are the roadblocks to the ongoing FTA talks? Well, at the very outset, there seem to be differences in the extent to which perhaps a free trade agreement can be realized and extend to various sectors, keeping interests of both nations intact. Some of the key concerns that are delaying the finalization of the free trade agreement, well, differences over market access. For the UK, regaining access to and control over the global market is critical, especially after the exit from the European Union. The utilization versus concession debate is also a sticking point. Should specific areas be excluded? And what about protecting the interests of MSMEs in India as well? The other sticking point is the tariff rate quotas. Well, tariff reduction in the automobile and alcoholic beverages sector is proving to be a major challenge. Also, India's demand for professional visas and UK's concerns over migration, because India has pitched strongly for greater mobility. Also, trusted transfer of data flows across the border, because both economies are digitizing faster than ever before. Import duties, now that of course also is a huge challenge, because we have to look at self-interest and balance it with commercial gains, because national interests have to be protected while recognizing the aspirations of the two nations. Of course, intellectual property rights also is a key challenge for both the countries to iron out. But looking at how the India-UK FTA could be a landmark opportunity. UK, remember, is among India's largest export partners, and the FTA could be a boost to India's labor-intensive sector. This also ties in with India's push for agriculture and manufacturing exports, and the FTA could revive the global textile market in India, putting it on par with Bangladesh. The FTA could also mean tariff cuts on vehicles, because remember, India's exports to the UK actually equals billions of dollars. The elimination of non-tariff barriers, meanwhile, could also benefit India, as this could be a pathway to a trade deal with India's second largest partner, which is the European Union, to counter China's regional trade deal. But of course, some say that there will be more benefits to the UK and lesser to India, at least in the short term. But moving now to our special focus on India Global this week. Janvi Kandula. She was all of 23 when an American police officer hit her with his speeding car, and she was crossing the street and the police officer was responding to a drug overdose call. Janvi was thrown over 100 feet when the police officer's car struck her. A US court has now freed him, saying that there's lack of evidence. While this has sparked outrage amongst Indians, what has really angered Indians across the globe is the footage showing the officer laughing at the deadly crash. She was just 23, with dreams, aspirations, and a whole life ahead of her. This has, of course, raised a larger question: has the American dream turned into a nightmare for Indian students? And joining me live on India Global this week, well, I'm being joined by Purvi Jothani, who is the founder and managing partner at LawQuest, an immigration expert, and also with us, Nikshipita Reddy, an Indian living in the US, a student herself. Thanks very much for joining us on India Global. Going across to you first, Purvi, as an immigration expert, I'm sure you come across a lot of students, a lot of Indian students. What are the kind of trepidations and fears and anxieties that you see these students sort of going through, particularly in a country like US, which is completely new and something that they find difficult to navigate as well? Ma'am, I'm afraid you are on mute. Could you unmute yourself, please, and go ahead?
Sorry about that. So all the students who come to America to study always come with a dream, only thinking of the positive aspects of the life in America. Very few people think about their personal security. Nobody thinks about the gun laws in America that allow people to have guns. Of course, this was an accident, but so many of our students are being shot also on campuses, etc. So I think now onwards, the students are going to choose their universities based on the security elements around those campuses. I believe that the campus where she was studying was an open campus. That is, it's not a gated community. But I mean, if they were studying in gated communities, it could be safer. But what happened to Janvi was an accident. Whose fault it was is a different matter, but it was an accident. So it was not a gun violation or a hate crime.
There that it was an accident, and in fact the court perhaps has also said that there is lack of evidence for now, but of course they can return to the court. But it has been a legal battle, Nikshipita, hasn't it? Because her family has been waiting for justice for almost a year now, and this incident has really shocked Indians across the world. How is the Indian student community reacting there where you are?
We are part of Seattle, and there's like so many Indian organizations that have worked towards Jahnavi's moment it happened last year exactly in the month of January, and in September various organizations came together to strive a movement against this. Definitely we all felt like, as an Indian sole Indian community, we all felt that it is very crucial not to give up and raising our voices against injustice, even when it feels like it goes unheard. It's crucial for creating long-term change. That is what we are feeling right now, because we considering my situation, I came here as a student to aspire my higher education, similar to the case of Jahnavi. And when Jahnavi is one among us, we all felt like, okay, so what is the kind of value that a person has here? And especially when you said like the lawbreakers, yeah, lawmakers are definitely breaking the law, seems like. And they say that there is no proper evidence that has been proved, which is kind of insane. And like at this minute, the people are definitely not happy with the verdict, and we are coming as a community to work together and spending our time in reaching out to the King County officials and getting accountable for all the things. But I mean, again, like we are also losing hope. After all this, like many people promised so many things related to her, but after that, like yesterday's verdict, whatever we have heard, is definitely kind of like heartbreaking for all of us, and we all feel like we are all not safe, secure, and many questions and many tensions are raising as part of our community.
So Janvi was one among us, a strong voice there from Seattle. But Purva, also looking at the outrage over the body cam footage, because that is what has sparked outrage across the world. He was seen laughing it off and sort of almost dismissing the deadly crash. Do you see this as a larger pattern there? Because it reeks of racism and insensitivity. Ma'am, I am afraid you're on mute again.
I'm not on mute.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. There are two things over here that we need to clarify. One is that the officer who was part of the accident is not the officer who made those insulting comments. Officer Kevin David, he is the one who was part of the accident, Kevin Dave. And Officer Orderer was the one who made those offensive comments. He was making those comments when he was reporting to the president of his association, of which he was the vice president, on what had transpired. So the two officers are different.
No, but the body cam footage that has surfaced, of course, also shows a police officer in a sense sort of laughing it off. And the larger response, or as lawmakers, the larger response, I mean, you're a lawmaker yourself and you're a police officer. Don't you think there has to be some sort of sensitivity to it?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Officer Orderer's comments were absolutely insensitive, insulting, and absolutely erodes the respect for the international community, students in America.
Yes.
That has to be penalized. And I think that the government will take action against him. He was terminated for a bit or suspended for a bit, and now he's assigned desk duties, but I'm sure they will take penal
But
action.
as you said, he needs to be sort of called to book or held accountable for those remarks there and the kind of response that we saw. Thanks very much, Purva and Nikshita, for joining us on India Global this week. It is a rather heartbreaking story. She was all of 23. But moving now to the other big headline. Well, in a historic visit, the Greek Prime Minister was in India. While the optics and the camaraderie between PM Modi and the Greek Prime Minister certainly sent out an important message, the larger geopolitics of India's new partner in Europe cannot be ignored either. Take a look.
Greece is India's newest ally in Europe. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis' visit to India this week has established that. The Greece PM's visit followed PM Narendra Modi's visit to Greece last year. It should be noted that it was the first visit by an Indian PM to Greece in more than 40 years. So why is Greece so important to India? Let's look at some of the major factors. The first one is that Greece is a major maritime power near the Mediterranean Sea. The waterway near Greece is crucial to global trade as it helps connect Europe and America to India. Some estimates suggest that about 50% of global maritime traffic passes through this route. To add to that, oil and gas exploration activities in this area have yielded big results in the recent years. Now let's talk about some of India's interests in the region. Well, India and Greece are expected to double the bilateral trade by 2030. After Italy and Egypt, Greece will become a key partner for India in the region. Last but not the least is the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. The corridor was announced on September 9 last year by India, the European Union, France, Germany, Italy, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and the US on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The corridor will connect India with the all-important Mediterranean region, of which Greece is an important stakeholder.
So, well, India's strategic thinking there. But moving now to a war that the world seems to have lost interest in. It's been 2 years since the deadly Russia-Ukraine war began. Thousands have been killed, and it has unleashed global disruption as far as supply chains are concerned. How has the war changed geopolitical dynamics, and what is the way forward? Take a look.
Ukraine is much more than a local war on European soil. And I'm convinced that on Ukraine, India has an important role to play. It has a voice that should be heard.
Since the war began, India has been vocal on the impact of the conflict on Global South. Various leaders have echoed PM Modi's words that this is not an era of war. The Greek Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who was on a 2-day visit to India, is the latest leader to echo the sentiment. And after India achieved the rare feat of gathering consensus on the G20's declaration on the Russia-Ukraine war, many more leaders see New Delhi as a crucial voice in the conflict. When the Russian invasion of Ukraine began in 2022, many believed it was a matter of days before Moscow would capture the capital Kyiv. Yet almost 2 years later, fighting continues, with Russia making a significant victory last week after taking over the city of Avdiivka in the contested Donetsk region. The news fell like a bombshell on the Munich Security Conference, where Ukraine's Western allies convened to survey a gloomy outlook for this year. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba told those present that the era of peace in Europe is over, but a resilient Zelensky put up a brave face.
24th could have marked the end of the world as we all know it. A world of rules. Rules that are meant to protect life.
While Ukraine enters its third year into a devastating war, US military aid to Kyiv is on a gradual decline as consensus on the war is more fractured than ever before.
This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes.
The Biden administration has sent over $75 billion in assistance to Ukraine, yet its recent tranche of aid is stuck in a limbo. The US Congress has yet to approve additional funding for Kyiv. The US goes to polls in November this year. Recent opinion polls show both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are tied in favorability. Here, Ukraine plays a crucial role. While Biden has been pushing for more aid, Trump, who's been opposing sending additional aid to Kyiv, last week said that he would do more to protect Ukraine than Biden, while Biden would give Ukraine as a gift to Putin. Meanwhile, in a surprising development, almost 18 Indians were reportedly forced to work with Russian forces at the border since November last year, after being conned and sent to work as army security helpers. One person is believed to have been killed in the ongoing war.
11 नवंबर 2023 को एक बाबा ब्लॉक करके एजेंट है, वो उसको लेकर गए मास्को, रूस की राजधानी है, और उनको जॉब बताई थी लेबर की। जब हमसे बात हुई तो बोले कि आपको सेना में भर्ती कराया जाएगा। तब उसने बेटे ने मना किया, सेना में हम नहीं जाएंगे, हम सेना के लिए नहीं आए हैं, हम एक हेल्परी के लिए लेके आए हो आप, हम हेल्परी की करेंगे। मगर उन्होंने उसके पासपोर्ट और वीजा ले लिया उन्होंने, और उसको एक रसिया भाषा में साइन करवा लिया गया, और उसको फिर उसके बाद हमारी कोई उससे बात नहीं हुई। फिर 2.5 महीने बाद उसकी एक कॉल आई थी, उसमें उसने अपने को बताया कि मैं घायल हो गया हूँ, और फिर उसके बाद हमारा संपर्क नहीं हो पा रहा है।
While the war in Ukraine is slowly fading from world's attention, 2 years on, the violence in the region is nowhere close to an end, and the ripples of war are still being felt across the world. Bureau Report, NDTV.
So, well, the two wars rage on. Global diplomacy has really failed innocent women, children and men. That's it on this edition of India Global. I'll see you next week, same place, same time.